Hi, I'm Elise and welcome to Witch Way. Today I'll be taking you through the witches of the originals. This supernatural soap opera is a spin-off of The Vampire Diaries and ran for 5 seasons from 2013 to 2018. The original follows the first vampires, the original vampires if you will, and their struggle with other supernatural beings, namely werewolves and witches, to hold power in New Orleans. But each has their own claim respectively. And for the witches, it's the source of their power. The ancestors of the New Orleans witches created the ancestral realm. When New Orleans witches die, their body is consecrated, and this allows the deceased witch's power to be added to the well of collective magic, which can then be accessed by their descendants. Every 300 years, the witches must sacrifice 4 16-year-old girls from their coven in order to strengthen their connection with their source of magic. There are 9 covens who call New Orleans their home. Each coven has elders, witches who guide the witch communities. Several of these witches act as protagonists or antagonists throughout the series. And the witch community is led by the regent, one witch to rule them all, with direct access to the ancestors. Not all are New Orleans witches. Some witches gain access to magic through other sources or are born with innate magical abilities. And some of these witches were responsible for the creation of werewolves and the original vampires. Esther Michaelson. Esther Michaelson had the power to create these first vampires, as explained in The Vampire Diaries. She regretted her decision and tried to end her children, but they ended her for a time. In the originals, she is back again and plans to end her children's reign of terror, this time by binding them to mortal witch bodies. Esther herself has the ability to jump into and possess different bodies. Without Esther, we wouldn't have vampires. But without Esther's sister, she wouldn't have had any children to make into vampires. Dahlia. Esther and her sister Dahlia were born sometime in the 10th century and were captured by Vikings. Dahlia agreed to practice dark magic for them to protect herself and her sister, and then forged a plan to escape, but her sister stayed with the Vikings, eventually marrying one of them. A year into her marriage and unable to become pregnant, Esther sought out Dahlia for a fertility spell. In return, Dahlia required not only Esther's firstborn, but a firstborn from every generation, so was none too happy when they were all turned into vampires. All but the firstborn, Freya Michaelson. Yes, the family keeps getting bigger. Freya is a firstborn witch. This apparently makes her quite powerful. Riley Vocal portrays Freya here. We've also seen her as the young version of the powerful witch Fiona Good in American Horror Story Coven. Freya in the originals was taken by and linked to her aunt, who helped her control her abilities and devised a spell that allowed both of them to sleep through the centuries, waking for a year before again going back to sleep. Though Freya had no say in this, and she was finally able to break free from her aunt and reunites with her siblings. She uses her powers throughout the series to save her family and helps train the next firstborn Michaelson witch, her niece, Hope Michaelson. Born of her vampire werewolf hybrid parents, Klaus and Haley, and having a lineage of witches, Hope Michaelson is a very powerful witch. She is not only magically strong, but physically as well. She is able to perform complex magic with little to no training and can sense magic around her. Hope is the main character in the spin-off legacies, but I'll get into that in another video, as well as the witches who helped her siphon off her excess magic. Because of her power, she was feared by most of the factions in New Orleans and targeted by others wanting her power, including the Hollow. The Hollow was what became of the witch known as Inadu. Native American witches channeled their power into her as a baby, hoping she would be a beacon of hope and peace. She had a darkness in her, however, and they were eventually forced to stop her. During this process, Inadu cursed those performing this ritual, creating the first werewolves. Even after her death/imprisonment, Inadu influenced those around her as a spirit and amassed followers, promising them power on her return. Growing in power herself, she was able to possess other powerful witches, including Hope, until she was stopped by Vincent Griffith. Vincent is a powerful witch protagonist in the series and always looks towards what is best for the witch community. He was introduced in the series as a host for one of the originals and grew his own magical abilities. He was a previous member of the Treme Coven, one of the 9 covens, and the witches wanted to make him regent after their previous leader, Josephine LaRue, was killed. Meg Foster, who portrays Josephine, has had another witchy role as Margaret Morgan in Lords of Salem. Vincent declined this regency at first, but eventually became the last regent of the covens. He was powerful enough to save Hope from the Hollow, and had also previously dabbled in dark magic with his ex-wife, Eva Sinclair. Eva was a witch who turned to the dark side. She was discovered sacrificing young witches in order to steal their power, so she was locked away in an asylum for witches, which was encompassed by a powerful boundary spell, not allowing anyone to leave. Here, she became an original host. She was powerful enough, though, to break through her possession and control her body, and again tried to perform her sacrificial ritual, requiring bodies from all 9 covens. The very first coven we are introduced to in New Orleans is the French Quarter Coven, and many members from this coven feature prominently in the series, such as Sophie Devereaux. Sophie was actually first introduced in season 4, episode 20 of The Vampire Diaries, where she vows to free New Orleans from the vampires' ban on magic after her sister failed to do so. In the originals, it is also revealed that Sophie objected to the aforementioned harvest ritual, which needs to be carried out every 300 years, believing that the witches were only killing the girls and were unable to bring them back. She tries to save her niece, Monique, from the harvest ritual, but is too late. Only one of the harvest girls is left alive. Sophie channels the remains of a powerful witch to become an elder to try and bring them back, but she also needs that final girl, Davina Claire. Davina is that surviving harvest girl. As each harvest girl was killed, their power moved to the next. They represented earth, air, fire, water, and Davina was left with the built-up energy of the ritual inside her, making her one powerful witch. She was hostile to the witches after nearly being killed by them, and helped the vampires stop witches from practicing magic in New Orleans, sensing whenever magic was used in the quarter. But the magic soon overwhelms her and the city, and she chooses to complete the harvest ritual, sacrificing herself to release the magic. She is eventually resurrected and even goes on to become regent of the New Orleans witches for a time, giving her direct access to the ancestral realm. She uses this connection to help the vampires, and for this she is shunned, joining a wayward coven known as the Sisters for a time. They'll come up later. She is again killed and again resurrected, though I do like Davina's choice in films.
Or how I finally watched Practical Magic. And you were right. perfect movie.
Celeste Dubois. Celeste was a 19th century witch whose involvement with one of the originals led to her apparent death. Due to her abilities, though, only her physical body died, and she went on to possess several witch bodies through the centuries, including Bryn Devereux. Yes, the same Devereux, where she reverses the werewolf curse so that they could only turn human during the full moon. But she is first introduced to us as Sabine Laurent, the very first witch we see in this series, and its first antagonist. She hijacks the ritual in which Davina is sacrificing herself and uses it to bring back not the Harvest Girls, but previous French Quarter Coven leaders Bastiana, Genevieve, and Papa Tunde, all of whom had beef with the original vampires. She also led the witches to believe that Hope would be a danger to all due to her prophecy, that the child would destroy them all. But she isn't the only seer in the series. Seers. Not all witches have the ability of divination, and this sets these seers apart from the other witches, and they are sought after by all these supernatural factions to help them get a leg up on the competition. Reuben Morris was a seer hired to find out Eva Sinclair's past when she was possessed by one of the originals. A witch known as Alexis apparently prophesied the downfall of the Michaelson family. Ariane was a member of the aforementioned sisters who Davina joined for a hot minute, and they used their abilities to help a powerful group of vampires. And finally, Ivy, known as the Oracle of Jackson Square. She utilizes tarot to help guide her divination. She is portrayed by Shiva Kaliselvan, who also portrayed the witch medium Katrina Chandra in the Charmed reboot. This series really only scores for lore and the craft. Though we do sometimes see them doing spell work, these witches all seem to have the ability to draw on their magic to perform feats such as telekinesis and temporarily causing aneurysms in vampires to disable them for a while until they can get away. Though we do have a teeny little bit of real-world witch lore when one of the originals is describing the relationship they have had with witches over the years.
The Italians call them strega. The Yoruba of West Africa call them age, meaning mother. Where my mother was from, they called them hexa, and here we call them witch. Over the centuries, vampires have fought them and fought beside them, bedded them and burned them. Whether adversary or ally, they have been a force to be reckoned with.
The terms hexa and strega are indeed interchangeable with witch, though the term witch is still demonized in Africa, so the age, indeed meaning mother, is apparently a term of endearment, as age is the power of creation, comparing Yoruba women's ability to conceive with the creation of the universe. So mentioning this as being a witch may be a little bit controversial. If you know any more about the term age, please feel free to let me know in the comments below. The image used when describing age here, though, is an image of women from Sierra Leone. The other images used seem to be stock images, one not even of a witch, but a woman shooing away demons with a broom. Others are inspired by the three witches from Macbeth. There's an illustration from Faust and an engraving from a broadside depicting a witch's Sabbath. Let me know what you've been watching and any other witchy watch recommendations for my upcoming witch lore reviews or witches of. And as always, please remember to like this video, share it around, and subscribe to my channel to be notified of my new content. And as always, thank you very much for watching here on Witch Way.